Hey everyone, so in today's video we are going to be building out this screen where users can add their property to their manager account and they can specify all the details about their property. So let's get started. Now to start things off, we need to navigate to our server and search for your location file, and the thing that we're going to change here is the search function, and specifically we need to change some of the parameters here. We're going to add a few different parameters so that we can get more information from the API. And for the additional parameters, those are going to be dedupe is going to be set to 1, address details will be 1, match quality will be 1, normalize address will be 1, and normalize city will be 1. So that'll be it for the server modifications. Now just start up your server and navigate to your application code. So here in our app code, let's navigate to the Add Property screen. And first we need to fix a little issue. So here you can see that I am logged in with my Proton account. So I'm going to go to Add a Property, and as you can see here, I'm getting sent to this component. So pretty much I have a manager already associated with my account. That's why I'm seeing this screen. So if I sign out and then sign back in using Add a Property with the same account, I should get put back on the same screen. But as you can see here, I just logged in and I'm getting rerouted to this Create Manager screen. But if I go here and exit out of this screen and then go back to Add a Property, it's going to call Manager Query here, and then the manager associated with my account is going to be available. So then I will see this component. Now in order to fix this, we need to import useFocusEffect and useCallback, and then call the useFocusEffect hook here and pass in a useCallback function. It's not going to have any dependencies. And if managerQuery.data is falsy, then we need to refetch the manager query. And this is going to run every time that the Add Property screen is in focus. So this will fix our problem. Here I'm going to demonstrate that. And there you can see we're getting sent to the Add a Property screen now. And one thing I'm going to add here is that if the manager query is loading or it is fetching, then we'll return loading. So let's just add that real quickly. Is fetching. Now for this last return component here, we're actually going to create a new component within our components folder, and it's going to be called AddPropertySection. And right now we'll just export const AddPropertySection. And return an empty component. Now let's go and add this component above this. So we will go here and just return AddPropertySection. And that should auto import, and here we'll see nothing, which is actually what we want. Now we can take this and move it over to the Add Property section. Now instead of importing keyboard aware scroll view, we're going to import keyboard aware flat list. Keyboard aware flat list. And then we need to import screen from our local components. Then up here, import text. Import view from React Native. And import style sheet as well. And let's import modal header. Now let's go back here and cut our styles. And then paste them here. Now we're going to get that error. We just need to make this a flat list, keyboard aware flat list. For data, we'll just set it to an array with one value. So for me, I'm just gonna pass in a 1. And then for render item here, we are just going to return everything that we have below. So let's cut this. Let's make a return statement and paste. And let's see what else. Okay, so let's get rid of, and then here, let's close out our component. And let's go back there. And we're getting shown this add property section. So now we can start to develop the property section. So one thing I'm going to do is modify this header here so that text align is center. And underneath our text here, let's create a Formik component. And that'll auto import from Formik. Initial values will just be an empty object for now. And on submit, we will just say console.log the values. So it'll take in values, and then we just want to log them to the console. Values. Now within our Formik component, let's get the values, errors, touched, and all of these different functions. And let's start to build out that add a property form. Now within our Formik component, let's return a view. And let's create a new component called unit button. Now for unit button, we're going to want to import touchable opacity, style sheet, material icons, text, and theme. And then we'll create it here, and it's going to be taking in these props. And for right now, just return a touchable opacity, and let's go and add this into our form. So back in the picture, you can see that we have 2 unit buttons, one for single unit and one for multiple unit. So we need to display these unit buttons in a row. So let's import row from our local components, and let's move that up. And let's import unit button as well. And then down here, let's create a row with 2 unit buttons in it. These are going to take in those 4 props, but for the first one, we'll just say text is equal to single unit. And then text for the second one is multiple units. Now let's navigate back to unit button, and let's create our styles. Now for touchable opacity here, let's pass in on press, and then let's create a style for each unit button, which is going to be this. And here we'll just assign that style. So we'll say styles.unitButton and pass that in as an array. Now, depending on whether or not the unit button is active, we will apply different styles. The first one being a border color, and then a shadow color, a shadow offset, shadow opacity, shadow radius, and elevation. So back in add property section, let's just go and make the first one active. And here we can see that those styles are being applied. Now, the first child in our touchable opacity will be a material icon. Its name will be equal to the passed in icon name. And depending on whether or not it's active, the color will change. It'll either be black or our primary color. Let's get rid of that. And then let's go and pass in some icon names. Now for the first unit button, the icon name will be home. And for the second one, it will be apartment. Now underneath this material icon, let's display some text. It will have a category of S1 and the padding top of 5, and the color will change depending on whether or not it's active. and the text displayed will just be the passed in text. So with the unit button component created, let's create some initial values. The first one will be unit type, and we'll assign it to single. And then here, if the unit type is equal to single, then it will be active. And for the second one, if the unit type is multiple, then it will be active. So this is the logic for that. And let's just copy this and say multiple. And for the onPress event of the first button, we'll set the field value unit type to single. And for this second button, we'll set it to multiple. So now let's save that. And here it's working. Let's exit out and make sure that it assigns single. Okay. Now let's add some styles to this row so that the unit buttons are spread apart. And down here in our styles, we'll create a new style called row. It will have justify content to space evenly. And let's assign it here. So with our unit buttons created, we'd now like to create this address input. And whenever the user presses on it, they'll be shown a screen where they can input a property or a property address, and subsequent options will appear underneath it. So let's get started on building that out. It's going to be very similar to what we have for our search screen here. So if we type in like Miami, we get these options beneath it. And we actually don't want to navigate to the search screen, because if we do that and they type something in, then they're going to get taken to this map, or they're going to be shown properties that already exist. And that's not going to be very helpful whenever they're trying to create a new property. We can use some of the components that we've created for that screen though, which is what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is add a new component. We'll call it search address. And to start off, let's just export an empty view. And then let's navigate to our find location screen and pick out the components that we're going to need. So really we're going to need this input and all of these suggestions. So let's copy over the get input function. Let's paste that in here. And then let's go back. Let's get suggested text. And let's copy over this code saying suggestions.length is greater than 0. Then we'll return this flat list. And let's put that within our view. And here we'll just say otherwise it's going to be null, and close that out. Now suggestions doesn't exist, neither does a lot of these things. We still have to add our imports. But here at the top, we're doing a call to get input. So let's do that as well. And then let's add our imports. So first one is just going to be get formatted location text, import row, text from UIKitten, input from UIKitten, platform from React Native, theme, style sheet, and then let's go copy over some styles. So let's do this. We'll need button, And then we'll need flat list and touchable opacity. And then within our styles, we're only using default margin top and suggestion container, so we can get rid of the rest. We need to take in some props. The first one is going to be suggestions, and then the second one is going to be set suggestions. So this is going to be a state within the parent that is calling search address. So suggestions is going to be a location type or location array, and we need to import locations or location. And set suggestions is just going to be a void function which takes in an item which will be the type of location array, and then here we'll specify it's void. Okay, so now that we're taking in these suggestions and we can set them, we now need to create a value state for our input. So let's import useState. And we're going to call it value. And we're going to initialize it to a passed-in value. It'll be called default location, and we'll default that to an empty string. So here we'll say default location is going to be an optional string, and useState is going to be default location. Now let's create the handle change function. So const handle change, it'll take in a val which will be of the type string, and then first we'll set the value to val here. If the length of val is greater than 2, then we need to make a call to our server and get some suggestions. So if val is greater than 2, we will create a function called get suggestions, and we will await that. So let's create that function down below. Const get suggestions is equal to this. It's going to be asynchronous, as well as this is going to be asynchronous. So we'll call get suggestions, and here if val.length is greater than 2. And then here if val.length is equal to 0, we'll set suggestions to an empty array. Now here in our get suggestions function, it can either get autocomplete suggestions or search suggestions. And we have both endpoints on our server, and those are two different endpoints being called on the API. In order to get one versus the other, we need to pass in a type that we want into this search address component. So let's specify that in our props. Up here we'll say type can either be autocomplete or it can be search. Now here in get suggestions, we'll just create a new variable called locations. And if the type is equal to search, then we will need to go to our locations here in our services, and we need to call this search locations function. So we'll call search locations and pass in the value for that, and then assign that to locations here. Otherwise, the locations is going to be equal to awaiting get suggested locations from the same locations file, and we'll pass in value into that as well. And here at the end, we will set suggestions equal to locations. The types returned from search suggestions and the autocomplete suggestions are different. So we need to go into our location types and change those, or rather add a new type. So let's go into location, IQ types, and we need to create a new one called address. And we can get rid of this current address and just assign it to this new type, address. And then we'll have another type that we need to export called search location, and it will have all of these different fields. So with that done, let's go back to search address. And here suggestions can now either be location or search location. A search location array. And then here set suggestions can either be location or search location array. For this, it can now either be a location or search location. And that's going to cause some issues with get formatted location text, so we need to change that function. So now item can either be location or search location. And in order to specify the type, let's pass in either autocomplete or search, like we're doing in search address here. So I'm just going to copy that. And get rid of that. Here, instead of initializing the location to the address name, let's just initialize it as an empty string. And we'll specify if type is equal to search. We'll do something. Otherwise, we'll do what we're already doing. And at the end, we will return location. Here, I'm going to assign the address name to the location if it exists. And I'm going to make this a bit more elegant. And import getState abbreviation as well. Now if the type is equal to search, we'll just create a new variable for the address, and then we'll set location equal to the display name unless the address is in the US. If that's the case, then the location will be equal to this, and if the road and street exists, then we will do something like this. So that's all good and dandy, but now we're going to need to change, or rather add, this additional argument whenever we call get formatted location text. So luckily we're only calling it with autocomplete right now. So let's search for get formatted location text. And here in recent search list, we're calling it twice. So let's pass in autocomplete. And then here we can do the same. And then back in search address, let's do something similar, except that here we can just pass in the type, which is being specified in our props. And then here in get suggestions, we need to actually make sure that the suggestions, or the length of the suggestions, is greater than 0. So if locations.length is greater than 0, then we will actually set them. And here we should also pass in a value. So that's going to be equal to a string. And then we just have to pass in val up here. And now we can create a handle submit editing function. And that's going to be an asynchronous function. And we're going to first await getting the suggestions, passing in our current state called value. And then if the type is equal to autocomplete and the suggestions.length is greater than 0, then we need to handle the suggestion press. So we're going to have to pass in this function, handle suggestion press, into this as a prop. So let's do that here. We'll say handle suggestion press is going to be this function, which is void. And let's get it up here as well. And now this makes sense. And then here for this get input, if the platform.os is iOS and the type is autocomplete, then we'll actually display this. Otherwise, we'd like to display this. So type is equal to autocomplete, And to handle this button press, let's pass in a function. We'll call it handle go back, and it will be a void function with no parameters. And let's replace it here. Now here for this touchable opacity, let's call the handle suggestion press. And then for this data, we'll just cast it as location array. We can get rid of this index. Now let's navigate to find location screen and add in what we just created. So here within our return statement, we can get rid of this get input. We're going to reverse this, so suggestions.length is equal to 0. Then we'd like to display what we're displaying in the scroll view. Otherwise, it'll just be null. And then we need to get rid of suggested text, get input, handle navigate, we need to keep, get formatted location text, we can specify autocomplete, handle submit editing, handle change, we don't need those. So we can get rid of these states here, suggestions, I don't know where, oh yeah, we're gonna need this still. Let's get rid of these unused imports. Let's get rid of value. And let's import our search address. Now above suggestions.length is equal to 0, let's render out a search address component. Type is equal to autocomplete. Handle go back will be equal to navigation.goback. Suggestions is going to be equal to suggestions. Set suggestions. Set suggestions will be equal to set suggestions. And we can specify that as item as location array. And for handle suggestion press, we will pass in handle navigate. So here we'll have an item handle navigate item, and that's going to be as location array, or is it just location? All right, so let's go and test this out. So let's go to New York. And there we go, it's working like a charm. Now we can easily implement this into the add property screen. So let's go back there. So add a property, and let's navigate there back in our code as well. So here we need to import input from UIKitten. And underneath our row, let's render out that input. It's going to have a placeholder of property address and a label of address. And whenever this gets focused, we'd like to render out our search address component that we just created. So on focus is going to be equal to a function that we will create. So here above our return statement in the format component, let's create a new function called on location focus. And here for the on focus, let's call it on location focus. Now, before we can do anything within this, we need to create some more initial values and a state variable. Well, really, we need to create two state variables. One is going to be for the suggestions, and the other is going to be indicating whether or not we are currently searching. So let's import useState. and then import search location. And for our initial values, let's add in a street, city, state, zip, lat, and long. Now on the location focus, we will set searching location to true and set field touch to street. And then here we'll say if searching location, then we'll return a search address component. The type will be equal to search, suggestions will be suggestions, and set suggestions will be equal to set suggestions. We need to create a function for going back, which will just set the searching location back to false. For handling whenever a suggestion is pressed, we will do something like this, where we get the current location, or where we get the current item, and then assign all the values to the data within that item. And then at the end, we'll call handle go back to signify that we are no longer searching. So here, let's assign that equals handle suggestion press. And then for the default value, we're going to create a new variable called current location. I'm going to add this import, and we'll assign it here. So now whenever we press this, we get taken here. And here we're seeing add a property and the modal header. And to change that, let's go up. And here we will only be rendering this when the searching location is equal to false. And same thing with text. So now we can test this out. We'll say 6, 7, 8. And here we can go with this. And we still need to add some things to our input so that it displays the current location. So here value is equal to current location. And there you can see that it is working. Now let's add a style to this input. We'll just give it a margin top of 15, and then we'll add some values for the caption and status. So with the address taken care of, now we need to start in creating a select option for the property type, beds, and baths. UIKitten does have a select component, but I don't find that it's very useful. So I'm just going to create my own. So let's create a new component here. We'll call it select. And let's just render out an empty component for now. Or rather, an empty fragment. And I'm gonna go and add this here. Select, just so that I can see it whenever I'm building it. So for this component, we're going to need a new package called React Native Woodpicker. It's going to have the dependencies of React Native Community Datetime Picker and React Native Picker. So make sure to install those. And I believe that we already have those installed. I'm not sure about the picker, but I'm fairly certain on the datetime picker. But otherwise, just install the React Native Woodpicker with your package manager. And here, let's go with that. So with that done, import picker, picker item, view, style sheet, platform, text, and theme. And these are going to be the props for the select component. component. Let's create our styles below. And here, instead of this fragment, let's render out a view, passing in the style as style. Then we'll render out a text component, and we'll give that a style of label, which is just a font weight of bold and margin bottom of 5. Now let's go back into AddPropertySection, and for the label, we want that to be property type, so let's create that. And underneath of our text component, we will display a picker, and we will pass in all of these props that we're getting passed in. And container and text input will be these. And then if we happen to have an error, we will be displaying some text, and the style for that text will just be a color of our danger. Now let's go back to AddPropertySection, and beneath our component and styles, we need to create a new array for all of the different items that we want to display. Let's import picker item. Okay, let's go up to the top and import it. And then up top, for our initial values, let's create a new one called property type, and it will be equal to the first object in the array, so apartment. Now here, let's add in those additional props of item, items, on item change is nullable, and style. And here we can test it out. We'll go single family house, condominium, all of these different things. All right, so with our property type select created, now we need to create our bed and bath select components, and they need to look like this. So we need to create the different picker items, which are going to be for the beds and baths. So for beds, it's going to be looking like this, where we're going to have studio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And for bath values, it will range from 0.5 to 6.5. So with these different values created, let's go back to our initial values and create a new one called unit, and it will have bedrooms and bathrooms as fields. So those will be initialized to the first object within each given array. Now we need to go underneath our select component for property type and create a row. Now let's create a new select component. Now for the props here, we're going to have a label of beds. Item will be the bedrooms. Items will be the bed values. And then on the item change, we need to set the unit.bedrooms to passed in item, and is nullable is false. Okay, so there is our beds select component, but now we need to give it a new style. So let's create that. The style for it will be called small select. All right, now let's copy this and just paste another one beneath it. And this time it will read baths values.unit.bathrooms, bath values unit.bathrooms is nullable, and that will be true as well. So now we need to add a new style to our row. This style will be called unit row, and it will have justify content space between. So let's add that to the row here for the beds and baths. So style equals styles dot unit row, and we also want to assign it styles dot input, so we get some margin top. Styles dot input And let's save that. All right, so there you can see it's looking a lot better now. So this will only work for when the unit type is single. This is what we want to display, but when it is double, we would actually like to display something a little bit different. So that's what we need to build out next. Now to get started, I'm going to go back to my initial values and create a new value. It's going to be called units, and it's going to consist of a unit, pretty much just like this, except that the object needs to have a field called unit, and that needs to be a string, which is required, and then bedrooms and bathrooms as well. So here where we are displaying this row where we've got this bed select component and the bath select component, let's create a condition. So we will say unit type is equal to single. Then this is what we actually want to display. Otherwise, we would like to display something different. And here I said unit type, it needs to be values.unitType. So now when we go to multiple units, it should show nothing, and that's what is currently happening. So with that taken care of, we need to actually figure out what we want to display whenever we are displaying multiple, or whenever the unit type is multiple, I should say. In our initial values, this units is an array, so we're going to need to map through each array and ask the user what do they want for the unit name, the number of bedrooms, and the number of bathrooms. So let's do that here by saying values.units.map, and then we will map through each object within that array. So here we'll have I and then index, and we will return a new component or a new fragment. The first thing within this will be an input, and here I'm going to change I to item. There we have our input. Let's change this outer component to view and assign a key to it. So here we'll say key is equal to the index. Now underneath this input, we're going to want something like what we have whenever we go to our single unit. So select components for the beds and baths. So let's just copy what we have up here and paste it below. Instead of here where it says values.unit.bedrooms, change that to item.bedrooms. Same thing with bathrooms. And let's change out the index. So we're going to want something like this. So set value. Okay, and then instead of unit, we're going to want bedrooms. And I'm going to copy this, paste it down below, and specify bathrooms. Now we need to add some styling to the unit section, which is just this view. We'll give it a margin vertical of 20. So let's go back here and apply that. Styles.unit section. And now if the user has more than one property, they're going to want to add maybe multiple whenever they're initially signing up or creating this property. So let's create a button so that they can do that. So here above where we are mapping through our components, or rather that array, let's create a new touchable opacity component, and hopefully it will auto import. And I can't remember if we imported material icons or not. Okay, no, we didn't. So let's import material icons from Expo Vector Icons. And within our touchable opacity, create a new material icon. It's going to have the name of add circle icon, And we're going to need to import theme and give it color-info-500 for the color. And underneath of that, we'll have some text saying add another unit. Now we just need to add some styles to our touchable opacity and text. So we'll call this component the add unit component within our styles. So down here, add unit will have a flex direction of row and these additional styles. And then add unit text will have a font weight of bold and margin left of 5. So let's assign that style here. Styles.addUnit. And for the onPress event, we'd like to add another object within this values.units array. And the object just needs to be an empty one, just like this. Well, it's not necessarily empty, but it's the default one. So let's just assign that to an empty function for now. And then here within our format component again, we're going to have to create a new function. So all this stuff is going to be below searching location. So that's where I'm going to put it. It will be called add unit. And what we're going to do is copy the current values.units array. Then we're going to push a new object into that array with the default fields, and then we will set the field value units to our new variable. So back in the touchable opacity, let's just call add unit, and we can give this a go. So whenever we click on this, it adds a new input. Now what if the user wants to get rid of one of these inputs? Maybe they clicked on the button one too many times and now they can't get rid of one of the inputs. So let's implement that next. So go back into where we are mapping through the array, and here where we have our input, let's add a fragment around that. Or actually, yeah, we're going to need a view. So we only want to display this button whenever the length of the items within the array is greater than 1. So let's write out that condition here. So values.units.length is greater than 1, else null. And here we want to render out a touchable opacity. And then within this, we need to have some text. That text is just going to say remove unit. And we need to give it its own special style. So for this style on the text, let's add that down below. And it's going to have a font weight of bold. All right, now we need to add a style to this outside touchable opacity. That style is going to be called remove unit. And it's going to have these different fields. And there we go. It's now looking a lot better. And if we remove a certain unit, then nothing happens. So let's create a new function to remove a unit from the array. So underneath add unit, we're going to create a new function called remove unit. And it's going to take in an index, which will be a number. And then we are going to do what we did up here, first copying the current values.units into a new array. And then we're going to filter through the current units, making sure that all of the indexes going into our new units are not equal to the passed in index. And down below, we will just set the field value units to our new units. Now go back to the touchable opacity, and we will assign that for the onPress prop, we'll say remove units, or remove unit. And here I'm going to need to do this and pass in the index. And now let's remove a unit. So let me type into one, make sure that we are actually removing the correct one. So 282E, and we still have the prior one, W6W. So with that done, we need to add a style so that there is a divider between different units. So let's first import divider from UIKitten. And let's compress this. Yeah, here we are. So above this unit input, let's add in a new divider. So we'll say if the index is greater than 0, we would like to display our divider, otherwise we won't. And for the divider, the style is going to look like this, where we have a background color of color-gray. The width will be 95%, margin bottom 30, and align self will be center. And this is what it will look like. So now that we can account for multiple units and single units, let's add some validation so that whenever the user tries to submit, then we can actually validate if their inputs are valid or not. So here I'm going to create a new variable underneath all of these other ones. It's going to be called validation schema, and it's going to be using Yup. And for right now, we'll just assign it to an object and go up here and import everything as Yup from Yup. And to make this more helpful, let's go and get our initial values and assign those to their own variable. So I'm going to cut this down below, and we'll make a new variable called initial values equal to that. And then let's just go and assign those here. So it's going to be equal to initial values. And validation schema is going to be equal to validation schema. So to start off the validation schema, we need to create a yup.object.shape. And within this, we'll have a unit type. So put that down, and that will be yup.string .required, and we'll say it's required. And pretty much you can do the same thing for street, city, state, zip, lat, and long. Now for property type, that is going to be an object, which, okay, let's go look at what it's going to look like. So it's going to have a label and a value. So pretty much you would just do what we did here. So I'm going to copy this, and then we're going to create a property type field, and it's going to be equal to that. And within it, we are going to have a label and value. So label is going to be a string, and so is value. So let's paste those into there. Yup.string.required, and we'll specify it's required. And for value, it's the same thing. So let's copy this and paste it. Now for unit and units, these ones are a little trickier just because whenever The unit type is single. We really only care about unit. So units will not be required. Whereas whenever it's multiple, we care about units. So unit will not be required. So to get started, let's just create the field. And that is going to be a Yup object. And then we need to make use of this when function or method. And really what we need to specify is that when unit type, and then here we'll pass in some options, and here we'll say is single. Then we need to specify what we actually want it to look like, or what we actually are requiring the user to input. So unit will be a yup.object.shape. We'll have an object within it. And then we'll have bedrooms as a field, which will just look like what we have here. So yup.object.shape, where there's a label and a value. And then we can copy this and do the same for bathrooms. Now for units, that's going to be a yup array. So yup.array.when. Unit type is multiple. Then we need to specify what units needs to look like. So yup.array. And within your array, pass in yup.object.shape. Then we will have a unit, which will be a required string. And then we'll have what we have here, where bedrooms and bathrooms have label and value. Now that should be working because we already assigned it up in the Formik validation schema prop. So now we just need to add a button which calls handle submit. So here at the end of the Formik component, or just before the end, let's create a button. And I don't know if we imported button yet. Looks like we didn't, so let's import that. And here for the text shown, we'll say add my property on submit, or sorry, on press is going to be equal to calling handle submit. So here I misplaced this. I'm going to need to put it within my view up above. So this should work now. We're going to call handle submit, and then let's apply a new style to the button. Styles.button, and we'll just give it a margin top of 20. So go into your styles and add that down at the bottom. Now let's try and add a property, and here we're going to get errors saying that we need some things. So let's add in a property address here. So 789. This looks good enough. And let's see if we actually are logging stuff to the console. And yeah, that one went through. Let's try one for here. We'll give it a unit of 908. And let's change this to a 1 bedroom and add another unit. Let's say 56. It'll have 4 baths. And let's see if that works. And there we are. So we have 4 and studio, which is consistent. The unit number is 56. And the first one is what we put. So 908. Yep. So In the next video, I'm going to show you guys how you can enter this information into a data structure within your database, or rather it's going to be a table because we're using a SQL database, but you get the point. So I'll see you guys in the next video, and thank you for watching.